So we've already talked a bit in our panel discussion about onboarding and what makes an onboarding program great. But I would like you now to do some brainstorming with yourself. So I would like to give all of you 5 minutes where I would like you to write down or to think about what makes an onboarding program great, or the opposite. Have you ever had a very terrible onboarding experience? And so why was it terrible? What would you have liked to have? So I would like, as I say, everybody to think about that for approximately 5 minutes. And then we are going to discuss. So whether after you want to write your comments in the chat or ask your question and unmute yourself, that's fine. Whatever works for all of you. But as I said, let's take 5 minutes. So from now, it's 32 on my clock. So I will come back at 37. And as I said, don't hesitate to jump your comments in the chat. So what makes an onboarding program great? And think broadly, whether it's about the length, the topics covered, the people you've met, etc. Or what, on the opposite, what terrible onboarding program did you have and why was it terrible? What would you have liked to have? So as I say, 5 minutes. The 5 minutes are up, and please keep on. If you have other things to add, please don't hesitate to add them in the chat. So I've stopped sharing my screen again so that I can see the comments in the chat. So thank you very much all. So indeed, we have seen different feedbacks. So Ramesh, you mentioned something, and maybe that's a typo, but I'm not sure what is HOD's introduction. Can you clarify? Or let you type maybe.
It is HOD's, head of the department's introduction.
Ah, heads of department. Thank you. I was not familiar with that abbreviation. Thank you very much. Yes, great point. Indeed, indeed. Kimberly, most onboarding, the compliance training. That's also a very good point. In many cases as well, this is something that needs to be done. Not only the, as we said in the panel, the administrative onboarding, the cultural, the social, the technical, but the compliance is also something that needs to happen. And as you said, it usually starts there, but it's not always the best way to introduce people and onboard them. That's brilliant. We had Jeff, who said that he has a very structured and organized onboarding process, and it looks indeed amazing. With a presentation, so presentation to 25 leaders, a training deck with 127 pages and 90-day process, again, as we mentioned in the panel. The computers are ordered and set up in advance, and that is also very key, and that is what we again mentioned in the panel earlier on. When you can start to involve your people before they join you in the organization, knowing their expectations, knowing if they have certain needs, you also can do things to ensure that this transition is smooth. And just by doing that, ordering the computers in advance so that when the person comes on board, either he or she has a desk where to sit and a computer, or if the person is working from home, can just pick up the computer, have their user ID and password provided, and then can start working from home. So this is very important, and it's awesome that you guys have thought about that. And
if you wanted to make a comment, go ahead, Wes, unmute yourself. Or Chris, no, sorry, it's Chris, my bad.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. How are you guys doing today on wonderful Wednesday?
We are good. Thank you for joining us, Chris.
I'm so humbled and honored to be here. Kevin Ward, thank you so much for sending this out to me. I greatly appreciate you, brother. Listen, I want to bring this to the table and everything like that. I want to get everybody's thoughts and insights on this. Number one, should we start leading with our humanity? And should we also, number two, start leading by permission rather than position? And I'll pose that question to everyone.
That is a great question. So let me start first to answer your first question. Should we start leading by you being more human? I would say a big yes to me. And that is one thing I've always tried to do when I manage all my teams, is always make sure that you put your people first. I always think of this quote who says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that is really it. When people know that you are there to support them, to guide them, that you make sure you provide them with the right tools, with the right processes, with the right equipment, with the right support, whether it is you mentoring or coaching that person or having someone else mentor them, etc. They will know that they are in a safe environment. They will know they can trust you. And this is how they will go above and beyond what you've asked them. And that's how you as a team will achieve results and sometimes even exceed results. As I say, I've always done that with my teams. I've always led by example to try to tell them it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to disagree with me because I don't know everything. So please don't be afraid. And as you say, being human to me is key. To Kevin's point earlier on, being a servant leader is key. We are, of course, we have to have the vision, and we as leader have to show the way and guide people on what needs to be done. But actually, we are there for our teams, and a team is only as strong as the leader is, and a leader would be nothing without their team members. So that would be my answer for your first question, Chris. I don't know, Anton, Kevin, would you like to add something else on that first question?
I mean, it's something that, and it's not to say your statement's off. It's just, I've heard the statement of leading with humanity, putting the human first. What I want society to do is to go a step further and define what that looks like, right? Is to set up and is to train and educate leaders. What does that actually looks like? Which Human SOS Conference is ultimately the first R stab at it. But what do these actions look like versus just talking about feelings? And yes, I'm putting people first, but you're saying that, but then you're the person that's making them stay late and work, you know, into the late hours of the night, burning them out, or you're the person that's calling them on weekends, right? Like, do our actions speak that? Not just that we care, do we actually show that?
Yeah, and as mentioned earlier, servant leadership, that's the foundation. And if we're operating from that foundation continuously, you know, people, when I talk for servant leadership, people are going, oh yeah, pushover. No, some of the strongest people I know because of the depth of character are servant leaders. And when it's necessary to, as Anton pointed out, to show somebody love in another way, to say, no, that's wrong. And I'm going to help you figure out how to address it. Can't have all touchy-feely good stuff. Sometimes it's going to be the not so feel good moments where we say, you know, I love you, but you're messing up here. But key here is the human side of it is, okay, I'll work with you to figure out how we get through this and grow through this. And so, yeah, the human, I mean, we call it human SOS. It's definitely a priority, but just keeping the balance between the human element in terms of the compassion, but there's got to be some truth in there too.
Yeah, Wes made a great comment. He says it's transforming managers into leaders, and that's exactly really true leaders, not managing things or managing people, but really managing things and leading people. That is what is important. Great comment, Wes. And Chris, sorry, can you repeat your second question?
My second question is, should we lead by permission rather than position? Because if we can start leading from that mindset, then we're not in a place of authority. And like that guy just said about management, who wants to be managed anymore? We need to have people to lead others and get them to where they need to go. And that's what my question was to you is, can we lead by permission rather than position?
That's a brilliant question. I would have to think a bit more about it, but my first reaction is, as you say, for me, a leader is someone who is going to take risks and who is not going to ask permission. Yes, in some cases, they may have to ask their senior leaders, their VP, their CEO, whatever. but generally they should be the ones who say, this is what we're going to do, and you know what, we're never going to fail, because either we're going to win, we're going to accomplish what we've set our minds to, or we're going to learn something, take the lessons, move on and do something else. So I think that is what to me a true leader is.
You know, bringing it back to onboarding a little bit with that statement, customization, right? With permission, customize things for each person, understanding that he is receiving it, and allow them to take that information when possible in their way, right? I was just thinking about something as an example for you guys. Compliance training was brought up, right? Yes, compliance training has to be done, but there's different people. Some may want to say, hey, pay me my minimum wage or whatever. I'll go knock it out at home, so that way I can focus on more important things like social interaction while I'm at work within my first 2 weeks. Others may say, you know what, I don't have time at home. I got kids and I got stuff going on. I'd much rather take my paid hours and do it at work. So the point here is, ask them, we need to do this, but how would you like to see that done? And give them ability to give you permission to do it with them.
Well, see, Anton, it comes back down to this. If we get to know people on the front end and ask them what their strengths, talents, gifts, and mindsets are, and really get to know that first, then granted, hey, if I can be able to knock it out of home and that's your strength to do it, then go do it. And I truly believe that's what we need to do. We need to give the power back to people in what their natural gifts and talents have given them to be, and say, hey, I am gifted at that. I'm social media driven. I'm marketing driven, whatever that may be. And if we get to know that on the front end versus the back end, which what we have done for probably hundreds and hundreds of years, we are actually knowing after the fact when we should actually know before the fact. Because why do you want to end up guessing it, and then next thing you know, oh, I got it wrong, because after this such a certain amount of time, I lost that guy because I didn't get in touch with him. I didn't contact with him. And I think that's the thing we need to do. We don't need to have the guesswork at the front end. We need to end up knowing at the front end. And then if you have to guess later, it'd be that journey that you can say, hey, I can correct the course, be able to steer the ship. And if you can get everybody on that simple buy-in, then it goes right into their line of sight. It gets into their mindset and say, hey, I'm on board with this because it aligns with who I am and what I want to do. And I think that's a great way we need to move forward, not only as a human race, but
and V's going to talk about that. She's going to talk about invest up front or pay later. Exactly what you just said so well is going to be the focus of that, because that's what onboarding is all about. That's why earlier when we talked about it, I say I take my new hire and they're right here. Right. They're right under my wing for first 2 weeks. It's not just about me being there for them. It's me understanding them and knowing them so that I can be the best leader for them.
Yeah, and I would like to tie that in with the comment that Wes made a few minutes ago about the current situation we all have and having more and more people working virtually. I think one of the challenges that this situation has brought, and a change of mindset for some leaders, is that some, well, I wouldn't call even them leaders, but more managers, is that they were micromanaging their teams. But by having people working virtually, by empowering them, by trusting them that they can do a great job, then you can really see the strength of certain people. You can really use that to improve the teamwork and the team synergy. And to your point, Anton, the leader nowadays, it's even more critical that he or she regularly communicates with their team members, whether it is virtually or whether it is face-to-face. They need to have this constant communication, again, to make sure that people are supported the right way, that they have everything they need. If they have challenges, how me as a leader can I support them? Do they need another training, another person helping them, etc., etc. So really putting these skills into perspective, into the big puzzle, and really empowering people so that, again, the leader can really focus on his or her job, can develop his people further, and again, so that they can do their job the best way possible.
V, if I might jump in on the leader question. Leaders by default in the roles generally have authority. Okay? And the key is, though, the balance is that if you're always operating in authority, or again, I'm getting into some of the leadership training I do, if you're always a commander, you're going to lose your team. You're going to demotivate, demoralize your team. So don't stay in a commander leadership role all the time. If you do, you're going to make a huge mistake. And so to Chris's comment, leading by permission, in other words, we have to earn the respect of the people and operate from that mode unless it's necessary, and we have to have the ability to move back and forth between the two styles, is to be able to go commander on people, because sometimes that's what it takes. So yeah, you got to have both. You can't, it's not either or. If you're an either or, you need more leadership training, just to be kind of blunt.
Yeah. No, Wes is making another great comment saying that generation Y and Z expect feedback versus boomers. Thank you, Kevin. Versus boomers and Gen X who were told to keep quiet and do their job. And that's what we did. So that's why he loves Gen X. Yes, exactly. The feedback is so important. And again, the customization, I'm going to talk about that in a minute. It's very good. And to Jeff's point, having a standard training is great so that you can get your people onboarding, but you need certain customization. You need to take your audience, to take your people into consideration and start with them. Who are they and what do they need? And as you rightly said, Wes, having a younger person on board is something completely different than having someone who's been on the market for 20, 30 years with lots of experience. So you need to interact with these people in a different way, even though you still need to train them on more or less the same things, but customization is key here. Great point.
Millennials changed the landscape in corporations. They did. I'm a millennial. I don't like my generation, by the way. I fit more with the older generation, but they have done that. That is such a good point. And Gen Z are continuing that. I think Gen Z is making it a little bit more about action, not just about how they feel about it. But those generations are the reason why this summit is happening, right? If they didn't start these conversations, we wouldn't start noticing these things. We wouldn't start going, wow, there is another way. Because boomers and, Xers, everybody was like, you just put your head down, you work, you retire, and then you're free. And then millennials came around, the .com era came around, and people were like, oh, there's something else out there. Let's check it out. And we got to keep exploring. We got to keep digging, because there's so much good on this other side of leading in a humanly sustainable way.
Absolutely. Great comment. I see some other people have joined us. Yagan, Kumar, another Yagan, thank you for joining us as well. Before I move on to the rest of my presentation, do you guys have any other comments or questions? No, I've seen as well comments from, I think that was Jeremy, who mentioned about the shadowing. That's also an excellent
there's
point
a comment,
as well.
V.
Okay.
Isaac wrote, can I add a word? I'm coming from an industry that is totally entrepreneurial. Nobody is an elected leader, and you should work your way up. People are extremely flexible and would accept bad leaders, but this is not the right way. People in leadership positions should feel that they might lose their position. What are your thoughts on that, V?
So
can I read that again?
Yes, please. Yes, please.
I am coming from an industry that it is totally entrepreneurial. Nobody is an elected leader, and you should work your way up. People are extremely flexible and would accept bad leaders, but this is not the right way. People in leadership positions should feel that they might lose their position.
Yeah, so there's many things that come to mind, but maybe the thing I want to mention, and is related to your last sentence, is that indeed, for me, a true leader is the one who creates more leaders. So yes, they should be afraid to lose their position, and that would mean that they have been so good at developing their people that someone else will be able to continue the job they've been doing, and maybe doing it even better. So definitely, I agree. The entrepreneur spirit as well, and it's back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. For me, a leader is in a way an entrepreneur because they are ready to take risks. This is the characteristic as well that is very important. If people would keep on doing the same thing over and over again, there will not be any creativity anymore. There won't be any more innovations, etc. So this entrepreneurial spirit needs to be there. But again, as I say, it can only be done when the leaders make sure that their team members have a safe environment where they can provide feedback, when they can ask questions, when they can come up with new ideas, and therefore can take the risk of having their job being taken by someone else. So that would be my answer.
I say it a little different. I say, don't be afraid to lose your position. Be afraid to fail your purpose. And if you're putting one in front of the other, you need to think about, what are you really after? You need to advance yourself as a leader. You're not necessarily a bad leader. You just need to progress. And what I mean by that is, tomorrow we're going to talk about John Maxwell's 5 levels of leadership. And I'll use that as an example in leadership development, but I'll just preface it and say, position is level 1. People listen to me because they have to. Then people listen to me because they want to. So that leader should ask, how do I get to that level 2 and further? Because failing purpose is way bigger deal than failing position.
Great point.
Is it fair to say, getting back around our onboarding conversation, that that's why leadership modeled during the onboarding process is important as well, so that people can really begin to understand the leadership piece and learn to work in that culture, including the freedom to have an entrepreneurial mindset as an employee.
Yeah, great point, Kevin. Yep, thank you.
There's another comment from Isaac. Isaac, switch to group comments, because you're only sending it to me, so I want to make sure we don't miss it. Because in the chat there, it says privately or to everyone. Select everyone when you're doing that, please. But the characteristics of an entrepreneur is that they look for independence more. And he said another character is that they have a true purpose to follow, and this is not money. But I don't think that's any different from employees. I think that sometimes we think that because employees, they don't want autonomy because they're employees. No, and people want autonomy, whether they're working for themselves or they're working for somebody else. They want to be able to do it in their way and put their stamp on it. So I don't know if it's necessarily different. And the same thing with purpose. Entrepreneurs are purpose driven, but if employees have a good leader, those employees would also be purpose driven. I
think here, part of what Isaac is noticing is a manager only environment versus a manager leader environment. A manager leader environment it's not driven by control. It's driven by empowerment, freedom for folks. And as a leader of a team, I want them to be entrepreneurial. I want them to be creative. I want them to be and have initiative and so on. So yeah, again, the key is don't manage people. Manage things, lead people. And that's part of what we keep bringing out to the forefront. And that's one of the big pivots that's got to happen.
Absolutely. Great point. Thank you, guys. So I'm just going to now reshare my screen to continue the presentation. Oh, I see one more comment coming up from Wes. The culture also has to support individuals being leaders. True leaders will create effective followers who are encouraged to go out on a limb with their thoughts and actions for the betterment of the organization. It promotes the we, not the me. Exactly, Wes. Thank you very much. Absolutely. Absolutely. Great point. So let me share my screen again to move back to the presentation. And as we said, and we discussed again, the onboarding that you are preparing for your new employees is an investment. It's an investment on the future. It's you're investing now, or you may have to pay the price later. So it's really important to train your new hires. And we have discussed now here on what they need to be trained on. So we said it's critical that you not only train them on the basic stuff, but really on the organization, on your culture and the values. Values is something that I personally think is often underestimated, and by the new employees and by the companies. When you can have the best employee or the ideal candidate who will have the perfect skills you were looking for and the right experience and the motivation. But if his or her values are not aligned to those of your organization, sooner or later you will have a problem, because this employee will become more and more frustrated. He or she will be more and more stressed, meaning he or she will not perform as well as he could and will end up being either burned out or depressed and or in the end leave your company. So the values is something that is often in my eyes very underestimated, and I'm always telling people when they are asking me for advice on what to do if they look for a job, I obviously tell them the basic stuff about their CVs, their resume, their letters and their research, etc. But the values is something now that I mention every single time, because I was once in a situation where I was working in a bank in the IT department, and I loved it first because, as I said, I went to India, I set up team, I helped with the recruiting, interviewing, the communication, etc. I loved that part. But then after, I was back doing like normal stuff and I didn't like what I was doing. I didn't like the mindset of the bank. I had always been working in customer service where it was all about helping people, and being in the bank at that time was meaning really doing things for money, and that was a complete clash of my values, and that's how I ended up having a burnout. So the values should really be something that you need to identify as early as possible in the recruiting process, and making sure after then, once you have identified that candidate that fits your values, that you reinforce it in your onboarding so that people know what it really means, the values you're using and how you're using that in putting that into practice. Obviously, the onboarding is also on the job, on the tools, on the policies and procedures, on the meetings that people need to attend, on the reports they need to deliver, etc., etc. And on the people, who is who. I saw two comments as well. I think it was from Ramesh and Vijay, were saying it's important as well when you have a new employee that they not only meet their team members, but that they also meet the stakeholders, the people they are going to work with, and their business leaders. They need to know why they're doing things and who for. And again, by having this first initial contact, this makes things so much easier for the new employee, because he can put ideally a face to a name. He knows why the person is requesting certain information, and that makes the whole experience, the whole transition easier. So very important not to forget in the onboarding program to make sure that the new hire will meet their key stakeholders, the business leaders they're going to interact with. And finally, one more thing I forgot to mention is that obviously, even though, like Jeff example, who has created a complete onboarding training, it's very important that, again, you customize it. You need to have certain things that you need to train anybody in your organization, as I say, especially if it's about around the culture, the organization, the values, etc. But you also need to customize it. And in my the example I always give is, if you hire an analyst, you will want this person to meet certain people, and the people he or she will meet would be different than, for instance, if you've hired a director. They are dealing with people at different level, and so they need to interact with people at different level, and so they need to know who they're going to interact with. So make sure that you customize your onboarding as much as possible, that you have the standard part, let's say, but that is also customized to meet their needs and to meet your needs as well, so that after, again, it's a win-win for everybody. So I'm going to stop again here for 5 minutes, because we are going to enter the last part of today's session.